Patriots Beat Podcast, Training Camp Day 2. Alex Barth, as always, here. I'm John Zannis, and that handsome fella up there in the corner is Mike Giardi from NFL Network, formerly NBC Sports Boston, formerly New England Cable News. It doesn't matter. He's here. He's here to, drop some knowledge about some of the stuff he's seeing. We're also going to hit up Mike. He spent some time covering the team's number one rival, the Buffalo Bills. We'll chat a little bit about what's going on over in Bills land as well. The Pat's primary competition, you would say, in the division, or the team that everybody's chasing. But we'll start with day 2. Much like day 1, really light day, another kind of like heavy red zone day, a really similar feel to the 2 days. But this was like a revenge of the defense sort of day, particularly late. So, the question's going to be, and again, you can't make too much out of what you're seeing here. That's a caveat with everything that we're going to talk about here. But when you're watching the offense struggle like they did in the defense, we're talking 10 straight incompletions until they finally got one on a pick play that may or may not have been pass interference there to get Henry into the end zone. Only 1 for 11 in those competitive drills at the end. So the defense really had their day. Mike, you start with that, and then I'm kind of curious your other thoughts so far in the first 2 days of camp.
Yeah, a couple times it appeared like, there were sort of the coverage sacks. I think a couple times too, and it's, they'll never say to us, but it looked like a couple of them were sort of designed scrambles as if, hey, you're not allowed to throw it yet. Now, rotate, move. But look, we always say this almost every year, that the defense is ahead of the offense. And yesterday we didn't get that feel. In fact, we had some people telling us, well, look, man, 7-on-7s especially are tilted towards the offense. It would be something if they didn't have success against us. Well, today at that last period there, you saw some issues with some separation, some spacing issues, which are all things that I think can be ironed out. Obviously nothing to panic about or anything like that. It's just, it was interesting because I think for me, particularly when I look at the Patriots corners, I say, okay, Jalen's a solid player, but he's not a star by any means. And you're trying Terrence Mitchell opposite him. You played Marcus Jones in the slot today because John Jones obviously is still on the pup. So there are certain things that are going on there that you say, well, the offense should be able to take advantage of that. And they, for whatever reason, were not able to today.
Right. And so, Alex, but piggyback on that, isn't that, I'm not going to say concerning. You're not sounding alarm bells here, but if cornerback position is clearly an area of concern entering training camp, you'd feel better about the receivers if they're consistently beating these cornerbacks because you're not really sure that they can remain competitive. But to see those separation issues again, even early here with no real pads and no contact, you're not even worried about jamming people or getting physical with them there. And they weren't able to separate at all there. That was definitely eyebrow raising.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give some credit to the defense. I thought Jalen Mills played really well in that period. Specifically, he had a pass breakup on Nelson Aguilar that, he had to kind of come back over the shoulder. And look, there's no refs to throw flags, but from where I was standing, I had a pretty good view of it. I thought it seemed clean to me. So credit to him on that. But yeah, when you see, there was another completion, I thought, on a play that really looked like kind of a gimme play, right? Every team has those couple of plays or even just routes that they know they can hit when they got to have something. It was Kendrick Bourne along the back end line, and Marcus Jones was right there with him. And he didn't break the pass up, but it was the kind of coverage where Mack really didn't have a window. He kind of tried to put it up and thought maybe Bourne could go all the way up and get it in toe tap. And it was just it was too out of his reach. It was a difficult throw. So look, is Marcus Jones maybe a star rookie? That's possible, but Kendrick Bourne isn't necessarily the kind of assignment you're expecting Marcus Jones to cover. He's a guy that's maybe a step or two behind after being in a red non-contact jersey all spring. So that one, battle between those two kind of stood out to me as, does it mean maybe Bourne could have done something more to pull away, or is Marcus Jones maybe ahead of where we think he is?
It's also in that instance too, we're dealing with less space, right?
Right.
Less yards to work with. So to me, like I always get concerned when there is massive space down there. There shouldn't be, unless you've picked somebody off clean or somebody falls down. That generally the windows are going to be tight down there. So yeah, I mean, again, it's 2 days. They're not in full pads yet. We'll see, but it was certainly to see them sort of control it like that after the way they got controlled yesterday was eye-opening for a number of reasons. And maybe something if you're if you're the glass half full guy, you look positive and say, all right, the defense, coming together.
Not so bad, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Hey, everything's great.
Well, and again, you can look at it that way though, because I think Jalen Mills, even when he's given up catches, they're really contested. He's been there, not only making plays, but he's been there even when there are, I believe Parker's highlight catch, right, was with Mills in coverage, but he's tight on him. And Parker makes a really nice back shoulder catch and toe taps it there in the corner. That's tight coverage. And if you're seeing that kind of stuff from Mills, that definitely is a positive. Bledsoe, a guy we'll talk about later today, was a tight end eraser, and really did a good job there in coverage. So any positives you get out of this group, particularly from places you're not necessarily expecting it, like a guy like Bledsoe to start, is definitely good. And you said it, like it's hard to get separation a little bit in the end zone there as well, but still happy with what you've seen from Parker over the 2-day period as a guy who definitely stands out in these kind of red zone exercises that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, he's just he's a bigger body, something they didn't really, I shouldn't say they didn't have a bigger body last year. They did. He also wore number 1. He just wasn't an NFL receiver. By the way, I don't know if you happen to see some of the Chicago Bears beat writers tweeting today, ball off of N'Keal's hands, picked off.
Well, did you see the video?
I haven't seen the video, no.
There is video of it. It's it could have been a better throw. It wasn't a great play by N'Keal, but it could have been a better throw.
I know, but we all did the same thing.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. The fact that they had to put out video kind of proves the point.
Yeah. They're doing what we did. Like, it wasn't necessarily entirely on N'Keal. The throw could have been a little better. That's just rerun the tape. How many times did we say stuff like that over the course of his career here? It was a little behind him. Make the catch, dude. Yeah. Anyway, their problem, not our problem. But yeah, Parker's definitely a revelation. Alex and I talked about it a lot yesterday, Mike. Like, Parker, what you want from him is to be everything you we're hoping N'Keal could be. Big body, box out, boundary receiver, those back shoulder type of throws. When they tried him with N'Keal, it didn't really work. A guy who can definitely get off the line a little bit better, use that body, high point some balls, which he's done over those couple of days. That's what you're looking for. And if he does that, even at a, average, above average level, it's a huge upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, look, when they made the trade, I wasn't one of those people like, oh my goodness, this is a game changer for them. But when he's at his best, he would be their best receiver. And I don't think anyone can argue that, just based on what he did in Miami over the course of his time there. Of course, the big question is, can he stay on the field for a full season? That's not something he's been able to do all but one of his 7 seasons, right? So that's an important thing with him, but you definitely like that size. And you can see, at least early, there is a little bit of chemistry between him and Mac, and sort of figuring each other out. And to your point, the back shoulder stuff, that's important. It just gives them another element that clearly they didn't have last year. Look, if you're going to have him as a primary boundary guy, that's going to reduce, I would believe, Aguilar's snaps, and you didn't get a ton out of him last year either. So, I mean, there are a lot of positives to be gained there if he can be anything close to the player that he is when he's on the field for Miami.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody that, in terms of the fit, right? He's obviously a really good receiver, but what he can do for Mac Jones, and we're starting to see it when you have a quarterback as accurate as Jones is, you give him a receiver with the kind of catch radius that Devontae Parker has. And, we talked about separation before, right? I think everybody thinks they hear the word separation, they think of a wide receiver running 10 yards past the corner. There's other forms of separation. If your wide receiver is 6'4" and can go all the way out of his wingspan to get the ball, and the corner's 5'10", there's some natural separation there. You just have to be able to place the ball to take advantage of it. And that's what happened on that catch today. It was a back shoulder. It was low. It was about knee high. And like you said, Jalen Mills was right on him, and Mac knew where to put the ball. It highlights the chemistry, and Parker was able to go down and get it. I mean, he had to reach a long way, but this is why they gave up a 3rd-round pick to get him. He's a guy that can give you those sort of opportunities offensively. That's what they were hoping N'Keal would be. That's an element they really haven't had in their offense since Rob Gronkowski left. I mean, that's something Rob Gronkowski is really good at. So I'm not saying Devontae Parker is going to be Rob Gronkowski, of course, but I think they have been searching for that. Mac is the kind of quarterback who can benefit tremendously from having that sort of skill set in the offense. And early on, that's been what stood out the most to me about Parker, is that's what he does. He goes away from his body, out muscles the defensive back, and goes and gets the football.
I would say one thing too, piggybacking off that, when you mentioned like that's why you go out and get someone. They also went out and got him because the cost wasn't extensive. And I'm not just talking
Well,
about in
yeah.
terms of draft pick compensation, but what he's owed. 2 years, $11 million. If he becomes the guy that's on the field 15, 16 games and gets you 65, 70 catches, then that's a massive bargain by NFL standards, especially as we've seen with the way the wide receiver salaries have gone crazy. And then, again, now you have in your system for a full year, and then you can decide, hey, this is a relationship we want to continue. Let's take a couple of years onto this thing, give you a little bit more money, spread out the cap hit, all that kind of stuff. But just another part of the way they do business down there in Foxborough. There's value in the player's contract, and I think that made it more palatable to make that acquisition.
Where do I draft him?
That's a good question. I mean, it's the risk factor, right? Of the injuries with him and the soft tissue stuff that, look, usually these guys, either they figure it out, and look, it's a different position, but Willie McGinnis had all those issues with the hip and the hamstring and the groin. And well, he found TB12 before it was TB12, and he got rid of those issues. Some guys, they find, hey, like the way I'm training doesn't work, or I need to spend more time on this. And with Davante, it's not always been the same thing, but there has been a lot of that stuff. So, I don't know if that means it's just that's the way his body's built and he can't change some of this stuff, or that he's just, I'm going to train this way. And, if the hamstring goes, the quad goes, that's just the way it is.
Well, I think I heard you say it. My internet glitched a little bit there, so I apologize if I'm doubling up. But, you look at Hunter Henry last year, right? We had a lot of similar conversations about Hunter Henry, and he hadn't played a full season, and he comes here and he played all 17 games. And after the season, he talked about how the Patriots training staff had somewhat of a different plan for him than they had for him with the Chargers, and he thought that was really beneficial. So maybe it could be some of the same. The Chargers medical staff is sort of known for having some not being great, to put it bluntly. I don't know. I don't think exactly. I don't think Miami has that same reputation, or maybe that same lack within their training staff. But the Patriots, we've heard other players say things are done differently with the training staff in New England, and it's benefited them. So whenever they pick up one of these guys, like you said, where it's soft tissue things or things that it really just feels like load management driven issues, I don't want to say I totally ignore them, but I look at it as a thing that's a problem the Patriots traditionally have been good at solving. So it just adds to kind of the value of picking up the player, where teams may devalue him because of his injury history. But if you think that you can manage that better than it's been managed in the past, it becomes less of a negative.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's just like an overly positive take, and Zannis is floored. He doesn't know what to do with it.
It's an overly, you being positive, Alex, on the Patriots front. No, and again, it is what it is. You'll see what it is. You always feel like it's a ticking time bomb with guys who do suffer these soft tissue ones, because everything's going perfectly and boom, there it is. And then it lingers and it lingers and it lingers, and it can submarine a whole season. But it's training camp. It's all sunshine and puppy dogs right now. Parker looks good. That's really all that matters. We'll worry about, health, staying on the field, longevity, and all of that. Mikey, 2 days right now. Anything else that pops out to you that you've noticed that you think is interesting as far as the team is concerned?
I will say that, and look, we saw it in OTAs when Isaiah Wynn showed up, that he was the right tackle and Trent Brown was the left. But part of me wondered if that was just, a little bit of tweaking Isaiah for not being there. And also just, again, sort of, hey, let's roll Trent out there. Let's see how his feet are moving at this point. And if that's something, if Isaiah plays like he did last year, we can't tolerate that. We can kick Trent back over to left tackle and feel comfortable with it. So for him to start here again, I guess just a little bit of me was like, okay, so this appears to be the plan. And, I asked Trent yesterday if he had been told that before he re-signed, re-upped, and he's like, no, it was, and I was like, or was it more of like, we'll figure it out when we get there? And he's like, no, more of that. We'll figure it out when we get there. So I think I don't think he believed he was coming back to be the left tackle necessarily, but here we are, a couple of days into camp, but based off of the tail end of OTAs, it looks like this is the direction they're going to head in with Trent as the left side guy.
Are you certain Wynn stays on the right? Because again, this is a guy who, you're not going to say full on bust. He's made it through the duration of his rookie contract, but he's not the guy they hoped he'd be when they drafted him in the first round as kind of an anchor left tackle. And, now he's kicked over to the right side. You might be able to save a buck or two if you're looking to clear some space. And if you think there's a negligible difference between someone like him and Haran, or, I guess Kajus would be another candidate there. And Alex and I kicked this around yesterday. Is Wynn on thin ice?
I guess that's one of those things that wouldn't surprise me. And I felt like, and he didn't come out and officially say it. And I don't think he leaked it to anybody, but just his overall tone when we talked to him in June was that he wasn't all that psyched about being a right tackle after being the left tackle since the day he walked in the door here. And I don't know if he's, again, we haven't talked to him yet so far here in just 2 days into training camp, if his attitude has changed at all over the last 6 or 7 weeks, or maybe we just caught him on a bad day. I mean, those things are possible too. But yeah, I guess that wouldn't, you always start to look at pieces like Isaiah, or I think we talked about in the spring about Damian Harris, just because you draft 2 running backs and Ramondre has got a lot of momentum and was really good for you last year when he figured out like the conditioning part of it and ball security, that like, oh, this guy can be the real deal. So you look at someone like Damian in the last year of his contract and you say, well, if somebody has an injury here this summer and they call you on August 20th and say, hey, we'll give you, you drafted him in the 3rd round, we'll give you a 3rd round for someone who you're probably not going to re-up next year because you don't want to pay that second contract for a running back. Would they do it? I wouldn't be surprised if one of the other guys, one of the young kids, shows that they got a little something there. And I guess the same holds true for Wynn. If they look at Haran and say, hey, he's 93% of Isaiah and we're paying him $1 million.
That's exactly
10,
right.
Yeah, then we can figure this out. We'll be fine. Those are the things that I think in the past they've always done. They've always or looked to do. So yeah, that wouldn't totally shock me.
Yeah, wouldn't totally shock me as well. In terms of other observations, people in the chat are already asking. The defense played well. One of the guys we talked about was Joshua Bledsoe coming in here. I counted 3 incompletions that he forced. One to Jonnu, one to Asiasi. Ripped the ball out from Keene there as well. I thought he was pretty solid. Any other defensive standouts today, guys? Because people are asking. The defense dominated. What did you like?
Go ahead,
I'll
just
say, yeah, not necessarily in terms of what he did, just because by the nature of the linebacker position, no pads, it's tough to say, oh, he made all these plays. But Raekwon McMillan seems heavily involved with what they're going to do defensively, and got off to that great start last year in camp before tearing his ACL. He seems to be kind of right back in the picture, picking up where he left off. Bill raved about him yesterday, called him a signal caller, which is big. If he's a green dot candidate, that could mean he's going to be on the field quite a bit. Called him a multi-positional player. Maybe they plan on playing him on the edge a little bit. So not a standout in the sense that he made a bunch of plays, but a guy that just when you put all the puzzle pieces together for what we've seen so far, seems like he's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, not easy for the guys in the front 7 when there's no pads on to make that kind of sort of impact splash play type things. Every once in a while you'll see them get a hand on a ball or something like that, and you say, okay, that's nice. But by and large, you're right. It's more about his usage, I guess, early on, and sort of the compliments that Belichick has heaped on him. I would go back to Bledsoe and just say this: if he wasn't sort of damaged goods coming into the draft, he was probably a early day 3 guy. And maybe we look at him differently, or fans might look at him differently and say, well, it's a 6th rounder versus a 4th rounder. But you look at that position, and while they've invested heavily in the sort of box safety types, Devin is 34. He'll be 35 in a couple weeks. If somehow, some way, they found a diamond in the rough in Bledsoe and he comes back to be the player that maybe some people thought he was before all the injury stuff, then that would be a massive piece for them going forward, because clearly that's a position that you have to circle for the long term and say, like, what's the answer there? I think, and again, it's early, but sometimes I still watch Kyle in space and coverage, and to me, continues to reek of he's a box safety, and he can be a damn good one. I thought last year he started to play better in coverage when they played more zone, but I still think in their heart of hearts, and they might have to be different this year because of personnel, but I think in their heart of hearts, they'd still rather be a man football team or be able to trust that their guys can do that. So I don't know if that's something they want to commit to long term. I think Adrian has also proven that, yes, he can play a little bit out there in space, but I think, again, more of a box safety. And, for all the excitement, for some of the excitement about Jabril Peppers, he's never really proven to be anything more than just a guy in this league and someone who's, obviously a valuable piece on special teams. But I don't know that I look at Jabril Peppers and say, oh, that's the guy that will replace McCourty down the line. I mean, anything could happen. Obviously, this year we'll get a close look at him, but by and large, I think if Bledsoe can develop, then that would be a great thing for the team to not have to really look at that position and say, we got to draft somebody pretty high to fill Devon's role.
Wanted to move on to Mac because, somewhat lost in these first couple of days because we were so much focused on, the receivers and how they're doing, is just how's Mac doing? And again, there's so much obsession. It's so funny because last year one, when it was a battle, you're tracking every single completion, incompletion, how's he look, and obsessing over it. But it feels like everyone's like, no, he's fine. He's going to be perfectly fine with no concern at all. Now, again, get the caveat. There's no pads, blah, 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 blah. I don't see him missing too many open guys. I don't see him missing throws. Everything that happened, I felt late when the offense couldn't get anything going. There really wasn't anybody to throw to. I think he held the ball as long as he could and, threw it high in the back of the end zone where it can't be picked off or whatever. But those are the plays you want to see them make. And in fact, you don't mind them taking some risks in training camp because you want to see what you can and can't get away from. Your boy Jimmy G used to do that a ton, and he'd get 3 and 4 picks. And it's like, I'm just messing around. I want to see what I can do. It's training
Right.
camp. I'm trying to fit some in there, and that was the vibe. It's like, I wouldn't make that throw in a game. So Mike, I'll ask you on a man crush level from 0 to Jimmy G, where are you on Mac Jones right now?
Yeah, I'm probably 8.25.
Yeah.
I really like. Look, I thought last year, and I was consistent with this, I thought he was pretty good last year. Yeah, there were some obvious highs and there were a few lows.
And he faded a little bit. Yeah,
but I thought there was good consistency there. I thought, the back half of the year, they really struggled, and he struggled against pressure. But some of that to me was just about their inability to beat pressure. And I'm talking about the guys on the outside. I'm talking about someone like Jonnu, who, I think they thought they could scheme him up and get single coverage. And, obviously Belichick raves about him run after catch and make some plays like that. And he just, for a bunch of different reasons last year didn't go well for him. So I thought some of that obviously has to fall on the quarterback, but I thought if I had to place the blame game, I put more on the guys on the outside and their inability to separate. So, it was a pretty good year. And I just felt like in talking to people this offseason, the way, I've talked about, I think, it's sort of like the thing like, he owned the offseason. Well, that's something the Jets would say. That's something the Dolphins would say. But I just meant he owned the offseason from the way he just sort of took control of everything. And I think you heard some of that from Belichick on day one, raving about him. I think you're hearing that from his teammates, that it's his team or it's eventually going to be his team. Well, quite frankly, it is his team. And I think he proved that this summer with sort of his commitment to it, and not just going and throwing to Parker and Kendrick, but throwing to Montgomery and Wilkerson and Little John, whatever his name, Little John Humphrey. I can't even, I haven't even got his name in my brain yet. But he didn't have to go do that. He didn't have to go meet with those guys. All 3 of those guys might not make the team. Certainly probably 2 of the 3 don't make the team. So the fact that he's willing to do that just reeks of this guy who's just like, no. This is my offense. These are my guys. This is my team. And I know, there are 21 other guys out there, offense and defense. We got special, but this team is if they're gonna elevate, it's gonna be in part because of me. And I think he's ready for that.
It goes back to something I said coming into camp that, people would always say, well, what are you watching for Mac? What do you want to see for Mac in year 2? And I always say confidence. And not that I think he wasn't confident last year, but you remember this is his first camp as a starting quarterback in the NFL, right? It's his first offseason. This time last year he was competing with Cam Newton. So he feels like in terms of relationship with the receivers, Mike, like you were talking about, he feels like he's been here for 3, 4, 5 years in some ways. And even on the field too, that confidence, we've seen it. And again, it's early, but he's testing some windows he may not have tested last year. He's making some throws he may not have made last year. And look, last year he's competing for a job. He's under a microscope, all of that. The results really matter. and not that the results don't matter this year, but they matter in a different way. I think this year it's less about him proving himself where versus just growing with the offense, growing with these receivers, getting ready for the season. He has an opportunity to do that. So I think he's doing more of that this year. It's less competing and more growing. And it's going to, I think it's going to have tremendous results for him once we actually get into competitive football.
Yeah, I just add a couple things on top of that. So I think in these 2 days, I've seen him make one throw that I like. I was like, I don't know that I'd make that throw. But to your point, was that just can I squeeze this ball over the middle in between two defenders? It ended up incomplete. 20 yards past everybody when the ball got through. It was a dangerous throw, but okay, fine. You can take that sort of risk there in the situation. You're not hurting anybody. And the second thing I want to say, and I kind of push back against this narrative that, is Mac, and this was before the draft even last year, well, is he almost maximized as a prospect? Because physically, there's only so many things he can do. And I really kind of hate that concept. How many 22, 23, 24-year-old guys have maxed out? He can do things, and I think we've already seen to a certain degree the way he's approached his body this offseason. He's changed his body. I think he'll continue to change his body going forward. I think we'll see about the arm strength, but it feels like there is a little bit more zip on the football this year. I think he clearly recognized that after last season. Like, hey, a couple of these things that I could do at Alabama, that the way the ball got in there was fine, but at this level, if I throw that ball and it has a little bit of too much of a lollipop on it, it's getting picked off or it's getting knocked away. Well, okay, I need to get stronger. And I think he went about trying to do that this offseason. And what does that mean? Does that mean his arm is 2% stronger, 5%? I don't know. Again, it's something we'll have to see as we go along. But the notion that he can't continue to grow, he's a young dude. I think it's nuts. And I mentioned this on another podcast I was on, but I think it bears repeating, and people will get mad because I'm going to say Tom Brady's name. But go back and look at Brady's picture when he had the dad bod as a 22-year-old.
Right.
Go talk to people about his rookie season and how he threw and how his body handled everything. Mind you, he wasn't even playing his rookie season versus what he looked like in year 2. And then obviously we've seen the transformation over the course of time. So he could transform his body.
Yeah.
Why can't Mac transform his? Again, we've already seen, if you put the picture up from last year and the picture up from this year, that's a different looking dude. He's leaner. He looks a little wider in the shoulders. He looks a little stronger to me. So, and clearly it's something he's talked about as well. So I just think that's nonsense. Yeah, he's never going to run a 4.4. But I'm fine with that.
He ran a 4.8, by the way, which is not terrible,
we saw it. And I talked to people in the offseason from around the league, and it's like, he's more athletic than you guys give him credit for.
Yeah.
And I think just go back to the Buffalo playoff game. He made a couple plays with his feet in that game that, if you're writing the narrative from the start of the year, he would have never been able, he would have taken the sack. He would have tripped over his own feet and fell down. No, he looked pretty fluid. I mean, he's a former tennis player. The dude's got some athleticism in him.
He's an athlete.
He's an athlete. Haven't given him credit for.
Yeah, and again, it's not just right. He dedicated time to his body, which makes a big difference. Also, he's just going to get man strong. That's just going to happen on its own. You look at Brady, the RPMs on his ball. As his career went on, he was able to drill the ball into tight windows where before he was just kind of more of a And so, last year, Mac looked a little bit, he had a little Chad Pennington in him with just some of these balloon throws. And the amount of time it took him to get rid of the ball got worse as the season went on. You wonder how much of that is in his head thinking, I'm not going to make that throw, so I'm going to hold it. I don't have that. I can't zip that one in there. And so it's just confidence. It allows you to take more chances, try to push the ball downfield. If you're really worried that it's not going to get there, you're going to end up being more conservative. You're going to take some sacks. You're going to make some bad plays. So that's huge for him. He has to feel good about his body. And you can see it a little bit. You can see a little bit, more on the ball, I think, already this year.
Yeah. And there's a little swagger there too, which I think, again,
got it.
is a really good thing for a quarterback. I want my quarterback to have a little bit of that. And I think he does. And look, again, I don't want this to get aggregated and someone's going to put words in my mouth or trying to twist it. No, he's not Josh Allen. There aren't too many Josh Allens, 6'5", 240 with that athleticism who can throw the ball out of the stadium. No, there aren't too many guys with Pat Mahomes' arm who can roll this way and throw the ball back that way. But to say that he can't be a top 10 quarterback because he doesn't have some of those natural things, I think is silly.
Yeah. Uh, Moving off Mac, I want to cover a couple things, Mike, I know you wanted to talk about as well, but people are super interested in the play calling situations. Again, it seemed primarily Patricia today, though you did see hints of Bill Belichick getting involved, and he was calling plays during those team drills there at the 11-11s. Alex, I know you were talking about it because I was right next to you at camp, whether Joe Judge was stepping in and calling some plays as well at a time, but it still looks like he's primarily a position coach. I don't think they're necessarily competing for the OC job here. It really looks like it's Patricia, and Judge is mainly involved on the positional stuff. It is interesting, again, how focused Belichick is on offense, and I can't remember which defensive player said it today, but one of them, Butler. Malcolm Butler talks today, and he's like, Belichick, man, where'd he go? Like, this was my guy. He's our defense guy. He used to tell us everything. Like, and he's all offense now. Where's the love? You know, he felt like, you know, he was like a jilted lover. He's like, Bill doesn't like us anymore. Is this just in the early days, you think, right now, that he's focusing heavy on, you know, okay, I don't have an OC, so I want to make sure shit goes right, and it's a new situation for everybody. So in the early going, I'm going to be there, but then I'm just going to kind of let you guys, you know, spread your wings and fly, and he's going to kind of go back to more of his normal role.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see. And when I kind of think about this question, right, I go back to what Bill said at the beginning of the week, that this is still an extension of the spring. It's still a teaching camp, and the competitive stuff doesn't begin until Monday. They have some pretty good teachers on the defensive side of the ball in Gerard Mayo, right? Steve Belichick, DeMarcus Covington. He may feel more comfortable with those guys on that side doing the teaching stuff. Once they get into the competition, once they get into the game planning of it, and this is beyond Monday into, you know, even into the regular season, you know, the teaching side of coaching, he may be with the offense. When it comes to the game planning, when it comes to the situational stuff, the scheming, where is he then? Does he then go back to the defense where, you know, he's made his bread and butter, or is he still with the offense at that point? So that's what I want to see. I understand why he would want to teach, coach the offense at this stage in camp. If it's like 2 weeks from now and he still really isn't with the defense, I think it becomes a much different conversation.
Yeah, and the problem for us is once the camp is closed, we go back to that 5 minutes of availability during the season or whatever, and you see stretch and maybe in a positional drill, so you don't really know how involved he is with your own eyes, and you obviously can talk to players, but you know there's some messaging that goes on there. They know what to say and what not to say. We've already run into some of that here as you go through the course of OTAs with the streamlining of the offense, but no one is really willing to sort of tell you how far that's gone. What do you mean by that? So yeah, I think that would be something that would catch my eye a little bit. But again, to your point, Alex, knowing you have someone like Mayo, and for whatever you think about Stephen Belichick as sort of the defensive coordinator, the de facto defensive coordinator, there is respect for him from players for his knowledge of the game and the way he teaches the game. So yeah, there are people there that he knows and trusts pretty implicitly. I know he jumped in last year at various points, but like generally I think there's a good feel for that side of the ball defensively. But yeah, you got to watch over I'm turning over my quarterback to Joe Judge, and I'm turning over the offense by and large to Matt Patricia. How does it go? I want to be there and watch it. I want to see how they communicate. I want to see what players are saying. You know, how are the interactions going? Because he's got to kind of keep an eye on that to whether it's working or not. And hey, reinforce, keep doing that. That's working. Or you know what, that thing that you were doing there, let's not go there again.
But it's on him if it doesn't work, because he's the one who stubbornly didn't go get
I think he embraced it though, right? I think part of it is Bill being like, fine, you know, like we've done this before. And I know it was different. We did it with Bill O'Brien. We did it with Josh, or we did it with Flores. Like, but those guys
I hear you. It's just
Patricia being who he is. Side of the ball. Yeah. So it's certainly different. And he's just like, fine.
Hi, who are you? Hey, what's your name? Matt Patricia. What do you do? Defensive coach. Great. You're running the offense. I'll see you later. You know.
What? Yeah.
I have been trying to find. I don't know even how to search this. If any coach has ever been on separate occasions an offensive and defensive coordinator in his career. Yeah. There's been like head coaches that have called both.
It was Raheem Morris, right? Now I don't know that Raheem was the play caller though. He switched in Atlanta from offense to defense to offense at one point, and then went back to defense with the Rams. So like, I don't know that he was ever a play caller, but that was like in recent memory. That's the only one I can think of. They shifted in midstream. They were like, you know what? We're going to bring you over here. We need your ideas over here. So, but yeah, I don't think he called the plays. So I guess the comparison stops there.
Right. Yeah, no, but I mean, like, you're right. That kind of proves the point, right? That's close as you can get. In theory, if they were to at some point down the road give Patricia the title, he might be the first. And I just looked at it more. He was the passing game coordinator, but he was never the offensive coordinator. In addition, and he's now a DC and all that. Like Patricia, in theory, if they ever gave him the title, might be. And again, I'm not going to go through every single coach that's ever coached in the NFL, but it's really tough to find somebody who has held both the OC and DC titles separately over the course of their career.
One thing I wanted to talk about, and Mike, you mentioned among the things that you wanted to hit on this show. It's not quite a camp battle, but it is if you play fantasy football. But that's about it. There's not going to be a bell cow running back and then everybody else. There's going to be a timeshare split. The question is, how split is it going to be? And for my money, I think it's going to be Ramondre Stevenson 60+% of the time, and Damian Harris is going to be the relief guy, and then you're going to mix in other people, whether it's Ty Montgomery or whomever, in other sort of roles. That's how I see it. It looks pretty split to start camp right now, that they're both getting equal share, equal opportunity. But Mike, what are your impressions? I know you mentioned when we talked about what do you want to talk about here, you just said Ramondre. Is this kind of your feeling too on how he's going to be used this year?
Well, I think it was interesting. Two things from him today about how much time he spent working on being a better receiver. Yeah, I think it was part of his focus late last year. I think he clearly like, this is something I got to work at. And he spent more time working on that in the offseason. And I think he looks pretty natural, again, in shorts and T-shirts, but he's looked pretty natural over the course of the spring and now we're here into the summer. And the other thing I would say is down to 225. So he's down about 7 pounds from last year.
He looks quick and spry again.
But he still feels like he has the power. And obviously that's something that, all of our eyes went, oh my goodness, this guy, he has that sort of desire to just rip souls apart, lower the shoulder, run through you, sometimes just seeking out that contact versus running away from it. So I'm curious to see that part, but he said he still feels strong, like he's just sort of redistributed the weight a little bit better. The thing to me here is that James White is a big question mark. I know they gave him a contract. You look at it, there's not a lot of guaranteed money involved. We didn't see him in the spring do anything of value. And here we are again a few months later, and he's still on PUP. I know our boy Mike Reese went to an event, and he's still walking kind of funny.
It wouldn't be shocking if he was a camp retiree, would it?
No, it's kind of where I'm going, and I don't have any insight on this one. I've been letting it breathe a little bit with James because I know how important the game is to him. I don't want to be down his throat, like what's happening, what's going on now. But you do wonder. It was a serious injury. The respect between the organization and James is such that, hey, James,
do your thing.
Take your time. If you can come back and you can make it back, that's wonderful. We're more than happy to have you back. But if you take this time and it still doesn't get better, then we can discuss other options. But he is a Patriot, through and through. I think Bill feels, very strongly about him. So I don't think there'll be any pushing there of James White in any direction other than the direction he wants to go. But I think in saying that, there's a huge void. And we saw what James was able to do just with the brief time that he and Mac were together, and to not have that sort of safety valve. Bolton did a solid job, trying to fill those shoes. But I wonder, just based on the work he's put in and the way he's looked so far, if Ramondre doesn't get a piece of that role, and then maybe your number of he's the 60 to 40, maybe that number is more split down the middle just because they realize, hey, in passing situations,
sure,
more often than not, it's going to be Ramondre. I mean, they did draft 2 backs, but despite some weird buzz about Strong, like we haven't seen him do anything. So I don't know that you can project those guys anyway. And I would also say for a young player, a rookie, to assume the passing back role, I don't think that's ever happened here. I think you go back to when Bill first got here and you go through the guys, you go through Falk, you go through Woodhead, you go through Vereen, all those, then James, all those guys had to wait or in Woodhead's case, he was with another organization before he came here, before they came the guy. So I don't know that Bill's ever been sort of like, I'm going to take this rookie and I'm going to put him in the third down spot on a regular basis because I got to trust him not only to catch the football, but then when we keep him in, he's got to be able to read and pick up the blitz. Like, that's a big role. They'll tell you that, a million times down there. That's actually the more important thing first. Show me that you can pick up the blitz before we worry about whether or not you can catch. I think maybe now they've already seen some of Ramondre and say, okay, we feel comfortable with that player in this role. And now let's just see how it develops.
Yeah, and the pass blocking thing is, I think, what gets forgotten when you have this conversation. And there were people last year coming out of the Senior Bowl, I remember, saying Ramondre Stevenson looked like a left tackle lining up in the backfield. But if James White can't go, and you mentioned, the report from Mike Reese and all of that, and it does seem like he's a question mark at this point, it is such an important role, and the Patriots are going to have to break some trend, it feels like, to fill it. One of their trends. If it's Ty Montgomery, who they have listed as a wide receiver. Now, I always say the two letters next to the player's name on the roster don't mean that much. But, he's somebody, maybe you play him, but it looks like they might want to use him as a wide receiver a little bit too. The two big trends they would break would be either Ramondre Stevenson playing there, because there's not a ton of guys that play early down back and pass catching back for them. Rex Burkhead's the one guy that comes to mind, but generally it's one or the other. And if you do that, is Ramondre playing both, or is he just catching passes and then it's more on Kevin Harris's plate? Or the other trend they would break would be they never put rookies in that role. James White had 14 touches his rookie year. So Pierre Strong does kind of fit the profile of the player you'd think you'd see there. But again, they, like you said, Mike, they don't necessarily put a rookie in there right away. The other guy is J.J. Taylor, who can move with the ball a little bit, but he hasn't shown he can be a pass blocker up to, where you need to be in that role. So something's got to give at some point. That, to me, is what the battle is. And it's a really interesting one to watch as camp goes on.
Yeah. Just go back to, was it the Ivan Fierce quote last year that JJ is a little light in the ass, right? Like, you can't, he's 5'5", he's whatever he is, 185, 195 pounds. And yeah, he's built like a brick, but there's only so much you can do with that frame. Right. And that's, sort of, I think JJ as a playmaking type could make the league, but I think his body type is really sort of stunted any potential to latch onto some sort of a regular role.
But in terms of split, and again, that third down role, the pass catching role, which belongs to White or has belonged to White, and you assume is his if he's healthy and able to play. If it's not, it could be a committee approach, could be some Ramondre, could be Ty. But what I don't get, and the reason why I think it's going to be more slanted towards, and why I say 60+ % of the touches from Stevenson, he's the only one who can do both. And I think the Patriots have always, the days of bell cow running backs are kind of gone, because it doesn't benefit you. It helps to have guys who can hit the line hard, play after play, and wear down the defense if you're going to pound the ball and be able to bring in fresh legs. So it makes sense to switch it up. But just that versatility and the unpredictability of having a guy and not being, you go back to from Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, and on, you had a guy, Sony, when he's out there, they're going to run. The percentages are ridiculous. When X back is on the field, they hand it off 78% of the time. Like, that doesn't benefit you in any way. Having somebody who can do both, which Stevenson is that guy, and run with power and aggression in short yardage situations or early downs, I think makes sense. It just makes the most sense. So that's why I think the split ultimately, where I'm counting White as maybe late to the party or out this year, could be Stevenson, the heavy share of being able to do both, Harris spelling him on early downs, and then mixing and matching with other people like Ty Montgomery potentially coming in there. I could see that. And again, that's just a vibe sort of thing. But I wonder whether the Patriots want to go back to that, where they do have a versatile back who can do more than one thing. I mean,
it surely would help your offense just to have that extra question mark in the defense's mind, as opposed to what you're saying when Sony was on the field. It was like, we're giving the ball to Sony. That's just how it's going to go. The other thing I just want to mention about Stevenson is he has the potential to be the best back they've had here in a long time.
Yeah.
With the combination of the power and speed.
Yes.
And again, we'll see how the body change, and losing the 7 pounds or redistributing, as he said, how that works. But I said it, he reminds me a little bit of Corey Dillon, like prime Corey Dillon, because of that, the way he runs angry. But when I think people might forget, young or prime Corey Dillon was explosive as well. There was something with his feet that was You just go. I mean, plug in the 2004 game tapes. He was a beast, and I could see that for Ramondre. Maybe never going to be the guy who gets 1,700 yards like Dylan did or close to it, because to your point, John, they don't want to do that. But he has some of those capabilities that make me think this guy could be a stud in the league for quite a few years.
Last news note, and again, and we'll pick up some pieces before we wrap it all up. But late yesterday, you had the news about the Davon Godchaux extension. And I know, for some people, there was some kind of question. I'm kind of curious each of your thoughts on it. But Godchaux spoke today and he talked about it and said this is a great place. But Belichick, this is the second day he's dropped just this bouquet of flowers all over a player. This is what he had to say about Godchaux when he was asked about the player earlier today.
Well, it's one of the best defensive linemen in the league. I'm glad we were able to work that out with Davon and Drew and get it done. So obviously both sides are happy. Contract signed and go forward.
One of the best defensive tackles in the league. So real simple question. Is he?
Well, how do I phrase this? Does it really matter? They think he is. And this isn't I've heard rumblings about how they feel about him leading up to this. They love his work ethic. They love his attitude. They love his approach. His teammates like him a lot. Some of this feels to me like he's a good player, but he's getting more than he should because he's become in 1 year plus, he's become a culture guy for them. And we know how Bill values those guys. So yeah, he can play, but also there's all these other things that he does and represents that we want, and we want to filter through the locker room. So, I thought he was fine last year. He didn't really jump out. And part of that is the position he plays.
Yeah, it's not a sexy position.
Right.
But I did feel like they were they weren't as bad as they were against the run 2 years ago, but they weren't very good against the run last year. And you could throw all kinds of numbers at me, but tell me when it mattered, were they able to stop teams? And I don't think they did a very good job of that. And, I tweeted this out yesterday. I talked to a source inside the organization, was like, that wasn't really on him. Wasn't on him. And that you guys kind of don't see the value in the player. Clearly they think the player is something. I don't know when they say he's one of the best. Is that like top 5? Is that top 10? Like maybe we'll ask Bill the next time we talk to him. I'm sure he'd love to tell us. He loves to rate guys. Like, well, Bill, is he Aaron Donald and then is he in the next group or what?
Well, remember the best player in the NFL at any given time is the player Bill Belichick was most recently asked about, right? He loves doing that. I kind of read this as, did he say defensive tackle or defensive lineman? And it's kind of a nuanced thing, but when I watched Godchaux last year, he played nose tackle in Miami. He was brought in here to play nose tackle, but I thought he played some of his best football, in the 3 technique or the 5 technique. Matt Dolph, who I work with at 98.5thesportshub.com, invoked Ty Warren's name kind of as a comparison there. So I kind of look at this and I wonder if they maybe plan on putting more on his plate moving forward. And if it's not going to be just that, 2 down run stopping nose tackle role. And if they're going to try to make him more of a 3 down player. He was asked after practice, after Bill made those comments, he said, do you think you're one of the best defensive linemen in the league? And he said yes, and he should say yes. Every player in the NFL should think they're one of the best. You need that confidence to play at that high of a level. But he was asked why he thinks he's one of the best. And his answer really stood out to me. He said basically because he plays the run and the pass. And he plays the pass not necessarily as a pass rusher, as a guy that's going to, pile up the sacks, but is going to allow other players to do so. He mentioned that he thinks he can free things up for guys like Matthew Judon and Christian Barmore. Yeah. So that's what I think, with this contract and some of the things that were said, I think they view him as a guy that can really open things up for everybody else, can be used in multiple ways, in multiple situations on the defensive line. They didn't necessarily do that a lot last year. So that's maybe where the outside perception comes from. They did it more late in the season, and I thought he played some of his best football late in the season. So I wonder if this is a sign that there's going to be a new, more expansive role for him moving forwards.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, versatility is good, but I mean, Mike Giardi plays squash and ping pong. He's not particularly good at either. So is he good? Is he dominant? Is he a playmaker again? And I don't want to, you don't want to put stock in, surveys, lists, and X, Y, and Z, but whatever it was a few weeks ago that got a little bit of buzz, ranking top 10 players at each position. Not only the players not have a single player, Patriots ranked among them, in a survey of other league personnel and whatnot. They only had got one guy who got a vote. So again, you're talking about is there enough playmaking on this team? There's a lot of guys who can do some things and play a couple, be versatile and go in there and kind of help you out and be able to plug holes. But you're looking for playmakers. And when you're going to dedicate money to people and extend them, there's nothing wrong with Davon Godchaux, but if you cut him, you save $5 million. But restructuring this deal, I think they saved $1 million. Was he that vital? Is he that important? You're talking about a team who's really looking for some players at a lot of different places that that they're lacking depth right now. And to be throwing at money at what seems a bit of a luxury item, again, we don't see what Bill sees. You have to trust and believe in what he thinks.
Isn't he now one of their top 5 paid players? I think.
Yes. He had a $10 million cap hit entering the season. So he already was. So again, they extended him. They don't have to worry about this position. They didn't draft at this position. So I understand maybe having a little bit of stability. Let's say you do draft a guy next year, you might have to wait a year before they can play anyway. So now you don't have to think about that as much. You do have a little bit of, insurance there. But again, you're just, the money is finite in this league. I know you can manipulate it and move it around if you need to, but you got to spend. You got to spend at places you guys are going to make real impact. I'm not sure if Godchaux is that guy.
Yeah, I think that's fair to question. I think the one thing, and just hearing Alex talk and you talk there, is I almost feel compelled now to go back and watch some of Barmore's success last year rushing the passer, and was Godchaux on the field next to him? Like, was there an influence there? I'm just kind of curious. I know we heard from Christian today praising, Davon high and low. But I'm just kind of like, as I'm thinking about it, like, is he making an impact there, to his point, like where I'm freeing other guys up? Did he help free up Barmore to have, one of the best seasons an interior defensive lineman has had in a long time, if you go by some of the stat geeks and all the stuff that gets out there in terms of pressures and things? He was, I think, only, what was it, second to Aaron Donald? It was something like that, and like in his rookie season. So, kind of curious now.
Yeah. Final thoughts here before we wrap it. And again, we have 2 days of kind of pretty mellow stuff, so not a ton to see. And really, as we've discussed here, you're not really going to see real competitive stuff until Monday when they put on the pad. So a lot of teaching days ahead here. So it really is hard to kind of make any real determinations outside of who's playing where, what type of groupings you're seeing, and things like that. And we've kind of definitely seen a few things take shape. Final thoughts, guys, before we wrap.
I think one thing that jumped out to me today, and there's a lot of things to watch. You're not specifically focused on two guys for the entirety of practice. But at one point I looked up and the scout team had Cam McGrone and Ronnie Perkins on it. Yep. And, we heard a lot about both of those guys in the off season. And again, I can, couch this and say, like, the front seven guys, it's really hard to make an impact in this environment right now. We'll see them put the pads on Monday, and then you might have a better feel for it. But that just, made me raise my eyebrow a little bit, because we've definitely heard a lot. And when you start to look at the pieces that they have at some of these spots, I would think at least one of those guys, of those two, would need to be a player for them and make some kind of impact this season. So that just kind of caught my eye early.
Yeah, I'll go with more of a deep cut. I've been getting a lot of questions about the sixth wide receiver, Trey Nixon, little Jordan Humphrey, Christian Wilkerson, and that really is the battle for that last spot. And when I look at that, I think it's not necessarily going to be who's the best player. They all give you something a little different, and what do the Patriots want with that roster spot? The biggest uphill battle for Nixon and Humphrey both, to me, was neither of those guys play special teams. Little Jordan Humphreys logged 52 special team snaps in 3 seasons. Trey Nixon didn't play last year. He didn't play a ton of special teams in college at UCF. So meanwhile, Christian Wilkerson, the third guy in that conversation, it looks like a great special teamer. That might be the best part of his game. So I think those other two guys are going to have to contribute in the kicking game if they want to make the team. We saw the first 11 on 11, kicking game work today on kickoff and kick coverage, and Nixon and Humphrey were both out there. So I think you see that stands out in terms of if you are following one of those guys. And we got some questions about Trey Nixon, Little Jordan Humphrey in the chat today. If you're following those guys, that's a big step. They've got to succeed in the kicking game if they want a chance to make the team. And it looks like they're at least getting out there and trying it.
Yep, fair enough. I think what's enticing about that particular battle is everyone loves speed, and
Right.
Nixon can run, and that's something that they've been dying for. And now you have Thornton, you have Aguilar, who's you didn't really unleash last year. The idea of having some guys who can get downfield is definitely enticing. So you definitely feel like the favorite among fans is they want to see Nixon emerge from this group and see if he can become something here. But again, early to see, and you're not seeing much from those guys, as far as the first couple of days goes. But lots of time to go. Mike Giardi's not going anywhere. He'll be at Patriots camp all day. You can catch all of his stuff on NFL Network, literally 24 hours a day. If you look up, Mike Giardi will be there, and you'll see his smiling face. So again, make sure you follow all of Mike Giardi.
Smiling at that point, but yeah.
Yeah. What's your first hit? 3:45 a.m. I've been here since 1. There's not a Dunkin' Donuts open anywhere. That's Mike's life. That's the life. This is the life we've chosen, right?
Yes. It could be worse. It could be better.
But I love it. So again, thanks, Mike, for coming on.
No
You see him popping on a few CLNS podcasts from time to time. I know he was on with Andrew Callahan earlier this week as well. So Mike, a friend of the network, thanks for joining us. Alex Barth, of course, his stuff, 98.5 The Sports Hub. He's writing on Patriots camp all day. Alex, what did you write about today?
I've got the notebook up, and I did a podcast recapping training camp. I did day 1 recap with Bob Sosi, day 2 recap with Matt Dolliff. So those are both up on 985thesportshub.com right now.
All right, please check that out again. New cast of characters coming in as this podcast rolls on. We'll have another episode tomorrow. Alex will be back with another mystery surprise guest. We'll let you know who that is tomorrow. Make sure you tune in, maybe around the same time-ish. Follow us, Patriots CLNS, on Twitter for notifications, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel here, Patriots Press Pass. Hit that little bell, turn on your notifications. You will be notified when you go live. I saw some of you guys got in here late. Shame on you for that, but you can always watch the repeat as well. So again, thanks guys for hanging out. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Alex. We'll see you guys